Imagine waking up in the morning, still groggy, only to see the sun rising and, wait a minute, what's that? Armed strangers on your property, looking dead serious, staring at you like you're the intruder. They tell you, in that rehearsed tone, that the land you slept on where you built your life isn't yours anymore. No, this isn't a scene from a low-budget action flick. This happened to me. For real. And I swear, in that moment, my coffee went cold in the mug while I tried to figure out what the hell was going on. Now hold on to this. The reason for all this has a first and last name, Vanessa Brooks. A woman who seems straight out of a bureaucratic nightmare, leading an army of cheap suits and clipboards from Ridgeview Estates. They showed up with papers, stamps, and an arrogance you could smell from miles away. But here's the kicker, the game changer. My brother-in-law is the sheriff. That's right, the guy who runs the law around here is family. And I'm not the type to swallow nonsense and stay quiet. No, sir, this got personal. It was a Tuesday morning, 6:15 a.m., the sky still painted with that lazy purple before the sun decides to show up. I was out there, tossing corn to the chickens, their clucking mixing with the cool breeze rustling the trees. Everything normal, until I saw it nailed to my door like a slap in the face. Emergency eviction notice, Ridgeview Estates, HOA. I read it twice to make sure it wasn't my tired eyes playing tricks. Fence violations, improper energy use, a $5,000 fine I couldn't even dream of paying. Deadline? Wednesday. That's right, less than 24 hours to sort out this clown show, and at the bottom, with a signature that looked written with the pen of someone who thinks they own the world, Vanessa Brooks, HOA president. So far you might think, okay, just another HOA being a pain. But hold this bombshell, I don't live in Ridgeview Estates. My farm, with its crooked fences and noisy chickens, is 3 kilometers from the edge of that pretentious community. 3 kilometers. That's like another planet in rural distance, but apparently Vanessa Brooks decided her rules don't have geographic limits. She must have looked at the map, pointed at my land with a soap opera villain smirk, and said, "Why not? Let's send the bill and see what happens." I'm not one to stand still watching injustice, so I grabbed my phone, snapped a picture of that ridiculous paper, and tossed it into the neighborhood X group. Anyone else see the HOA trying to play king around here? I didn't even have time to put the phone away before replies came in. 10 minutes later, old Hank, my grumpy neighbor who raises cows and cusses out the government for sport, chimed in, "Those idiots showed up here last week measuring my silo like it was theirs. Told them to shove their tape measure where the sun don't shine." I laughed out loud, loud enough to startle the chickens. But then it hit me. This wasn't just about me. Vanessa and her clipboard army were on the move, like locusts in suits and ties. It didn't even take half an hour for things to heat up. I was still processing that absurd notice. The chicken feed hadn't even settled on the ground when I heard an engine rumbling down the road. I glanced over my shoulder, and there it was, a shiny black pickup, the kind that screams, "I'm important," but only delivers dust and attitude. It stopped right at my gate, and 2 guys hopped out like they'd rehearsed for a B-list action movie. The first, a skinny dude clutching a clipboard like it was a shield, started talking right away. "Mr. Parker, we're here to inspect your property on behalf of Ridgeview Estates." His tone was so scripted it sounded like he'd memorized it the night before in front of a mirror. I blinked slowly just for effect and said, "You got a warrant?" He didn't even flinch, firing back with an answer straight off the tip of his tongue, like he was reciting the company handbook. "HOA emergency protocol grants us immediate access to any property under our jurisdiction." Jurisdiction? I nearly choked laughing. I let out a guffaw so loud the chickens stopped pecking the ground to stare at me. "Immediate access to my fist if you step past that gate," I said, pointing at the wooden fence my granddad built with his own hands. It wasn't a threat, it was a fact. They were on my land in my home, and I wasn't about to let 2 clipboard clowns tell me otherwise. Then the second guy, a hulking brute with a face that had seen too much sun and not enough soap, started fumbling with his belt. I don't know if he was reaching for a phone, a pen, or just trying to look tough, but I didn't let it slide. "Unless you're real cops with badges and all, you're trespassing on private property," I shot back, crossing my arms and planting my feet. The air got heavy for a few seconds. They exchanged a look, like two dogs that bark a lot but don't, and know how to bite. The clipboard guy broke the silence, pulling out his phone with a forced little smirk. "We'll document your refusal, Mr. Parker," he said, like that was supposed to scare me. I gave him a half smile, the kind that says, "Go ahead and try." "Document away," I replied. "I love a souvenir to show my sheriff brother-in-law later." By nightfall, things got even weirder. The sun had set, leaving that heavy silence only the countryside has, broken just by the croaking of frogs and the hum of crickets. I was locking up the chicken coop, the flashlight beam dancing across the yard, when something caught my eye. In my north field, where the land stretches as far as you can see, there were orange flags staked into the ground. They weren't mine, never had been. I got closer, my heart beating a little faster, and saw they weren't just random bits of colored fabric. There were coordinates scribbled on them in black ink, like someone had marked an X on a treasure map. Only the treasure was my land. I grabbed my phone, the screen light nearly blinding me in the dark, and snapped pictures of every one of those flags. The flash lit up the stakes, and I felt a chill down my spine that wasn't from the wind. Someone was mapping out my property step by step, like they already had a new owner in mind. The next morning, I jumped in my truck and headed to town, the crumpled eviction notice in my pocket and the photos on my phone. I went straight to the county clerk's office, where Jenny, a redhead with crooked glasses who's worked there since I was a kid, greeted me with lukewarm coffee and a wary look. I showed her the ridiculous HOA paper and the flag photos. She frowned so hard it looked like her face might fold in half. "Ethan," she said, lowering her voice like the walls could hear, "you're the 10th this month. Vanessa Brooks has been trying to swallow up land outside Ridgeview for a while. It's becoming a pattern." My blood started to boil, but I kept my cool. Jenny rummaged through a messy drawer, pulled out a yellowed post-it, and scribbled a number. "Call Sheriff Ryan Carter," she said, giving me a serious look. "The guy who once bailed me out of a state police mess after a bar fight years ago. If Vanessa wanted to play dirty, I'd bring in the cavalry." Time to fight fire with fire, I thought, clutching that post-it like it was a grenade ready to blow. It was night again, the sky dark as spilled ink, and I was on the porch with my phone in hand, the signal flickering, thanks to the damn wind that wouldn't stop howling. I called Ryan, my brother-in-law, the sheriff who doesn't say much, but when he does, you'd better listen. I spilled it all. The eviction notice that sounded about 2 ranches last year. One turned into a parking lot for one of her luxury condos. The other? A storage depot no one's ever seen used. I felt a lump in my throat, but I managed to ask, "Why didn't anyone fight back, Ryan? How'd they let this woman steamroll everything like that?" He let out a short sigh, almost a grunt before answering. "Because she uses fear and paperwork like weapons. Shows up with notices, fines, impossible deadlines, and most people give up before they even figure out what's happening. They sign out of fear of losing more than they already have. But with you, it's different." He paused, and I could almost see the half smirk he gives when he's about to turn the tables. "She messed with the wrong family, and I don't let anyone screw with mine." The next morning he showed up at my place with a beat-up folder under his arm and a face that said he hadn't slept right. He sat at the kitchen table, opened that pile of yellowed papers, and showed me a pattern that chilled my blood. Santichais. Maps with red markings, land outside Ridgeview Estates all labeled as expansion zones. Ranches, farms, empty lots, all swallowed up bit by bit, like Vanessa had a hunger that can't be explained. My farm was there, circled in black. Pen, her next target in the crosshairs. Ryan pointed at the map and said, "This isn't just about you, Ethan, it's a plan. And we're going to take her down before she takes you." 6:50 the next morning. I was in the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee rising from the mug as I tried to enjoy the last few minutes of peace before the day started. Suddenly, a voice cut. Through the silence like a poorly tuned siren, Ridgeview Estates Compliance Division. "Come out now." I nearly spilled my coffee on the floor. I ran to the window, yanked the curtain aside, and there she was. Vanessa Brooks, in the flesh, leading a squad of 6 goons who looked like they'd been pulled from a bargain bin private. Security catalogue. Shiny black tactical boots in the mud, radios crackling on their belts, and one of them holding a drone like he was about to film the HOA's next blockbuster. She planted her feet in front of my gate, her hair perfectly styled even at that hour, and shouted with the authority of someone who thinks they've already won, "Mr. Parker, we're here to begin the compliance inspection." I wasn't about to let this turn into a one-sided monologue. I grabbed my mug, took one last swig of caffeine to steel myself, and stepped out the front door wearing my beat-up Liberty or Nothing t-shirt, the perfect uniform for this kind of nonsense. The air was crisp, the sun barely peeking. Over the horizon, and I stared her down, stopping a few meters from the gate. "Lose the invite in the mail, Vanessa?" I asked, crossing my arms and letting sarcasm drip from every word. She didn't even blink, just adjusted her sunglasses, probably worth more than my tractor, and replied in that tone of someone reading a legal script. "You've been notified, Mr. Parker. We can now seize anything out of compliance with the code." I let out a loud laugh, the kind that echoes across the field and spooks the birds. "Whose code, huh? The one from your imaginary empire where you think you rule over land you've never even seen on a map?" Her goons swapped uneasy glances, like they hadn't signed up to deal with someone who fights back. Vanessa, though, took a step forward, the heel of her boot sinking into the wet dirt, and pointed a bony finger at me. "Resist and we'll document every violation to make sure you lose more than just your pride," she said, with a smirk that begged to be wiped off. I threw my arms wide, showing off the land my family's worked for generations, and fired back. "Document whatever you want, Princess. I'm the one in charge here, and you're about to find that out the hard way." Vanessa didn't flinch. She gave a sharp wave of her hand like some war general, and her 6 goons marched toward my barn like ants after a forgotten sugar cube. I wasn't letting that slide. I let out a shrill whistle, the kind my granddad taught me to call the cattle, but it works just as well for my girls. Suddenly the chicken coop turned into a battlefield. My chickens, yes, chickens, came charging out, a storm of feathers and frenzied clucking. It was chaos in plumage. One of the guys, a big lug with a face that said he'd never run, a day in his life, tripped over a rock trying to dodge a particularly feisty hen named Bertha. He face-planted in the mud, his radio flying from his hand, while the other chickens pecked at his buddy's boots. I nearly choked laughing so hard. Vanessa, of course, didn't find it funny. She yanked her phone out of her pocket, with the speed of someone who already had a plan B up her sleeve, and started recording, narrating in that cheap soap opera villain voice. Further evidence of Mr. Parker's hostile resistance to legal compliance. I walked up to the gate, still chuckling, and looked straight into her camera lens. "Show the chickens who's boss, Vanessa," I said, flashing a grin that was half mockery, half challenge. "They're waiting for your next order, Chief." The guy in the mud staggered to his feet, covered in filth, while Bertha let out one last victorious cluck and strutted back to the coop, proud as if she'd just won an Oscar. But the real blow came next. The roar of an engine cut through the air, and I saw Ryan's truck rolling up the road, the siren giving a quick blip just to announce the sheriff was in town. He parked right in front of Vanessa's posse, stepped out with his badge gleaming on his chest, and that calm demeanor of someone who knows he's in control. He took in the scene, chickens heading back to their pen, the goon wiping mud off his face, the drone buzzing in the air, and spoke, with that steady voice that makes even the guilty confess without meaning to, "You're trespassing on private property. That drone, illegal without county permission." Vanessa went pale as a sheet, her sunglasses nearly sliding off her nose. "We have jurisdiction," she snapped, pointing at a tablet one of her goons was holding, like a PDF could save her. Ryan let out a dry laugh, the kind that says you're screwed and don't even know it yet. He crossed his arms, the sun glinting off his sheriff's star, and shot back. "Jurisdiction? You've got a problem, Vanessa. And guess what? I'm the guy who fixes problems like you." Her goons froze where they stood. The drone sank slowly to the ground like a scolded dog, and I just watched, sipping the last of my cold coffee, knowing the game had turned. After Vanessa and her squad of goons retreated, dragging their humiliated drone and wounded pride with them, Ryan stayed with me on the porch. He tossed a battered dossier onto the wooden table, the kind of folder that's seen more dust than it should, and said, "You need to see this, Ethan." I opened it, and there was her name in big, bold letters, Vanessa Brooks, tied to a company called Pinewood Ventures. This wasn't just some overzealous HOA. It was a life-crushing machine. The scheme was dirty and well-oiled. They'd buy land cheap or just take it, forging documents with fake signatures and flipping it all to developers hungry for quick profits. My farm, it wasn't just a whim of hers. It was the first piece of a $50 million puzzle, a luxury condo project that'd swallow my Northfield and turn my chickens into neighbors of Olympic-sized pools. Ryan pointed to a page in the dossier, and I felt my blood run cold. There was a fake deed filed with the county under my name, Ethan Parker, like I'd sold everything for a handful of change. The date? 3 months ago, when I was fixing the tractor and hadn't even dreamed of this nonsense. But then came the ace in the hole. My granddad, a man who didn't trust the corner bank, had left the original deed to the farm in a rusty safe tucked in the back of the barn, hidden behind some loose boards. I bolted out there, heart in my throat, and found the yellowed paper folded with care. His signature was there, handwritten, the ink shaky with the pride of a man who'd signed it himself. I compared it to Pinewood's shoddy forgery, a fake, so cheap it looked like it was done by someone who'd never held a real pen. She tried to erase me from my own history, like she could rewrite the past with some badly printed lines and a stolen stamp. But I had the proof in my hands, my granddad's paper, the land he sweated to claim, and the truth Vanessa never expected me to find. And more, I had Ryan, a sheriff who didn't just know the law, but carried the weight of family on his chest. He grabbed his phone, already dialing the county judge, and looked at me with that glint in his eye. "She wanted to play with fire," he said. "Now she'll see what happens when we light the bonfire." But it didn't stop there. While I held my granddad's deed like a shield against Vanessa, other puzzle pieces started moving. My wire fence, which had weathered storms and stubborn cows for years, showed up cut in 3 different spots, the strands twisted like someone had gone at it with pliers and a grudge. The power went out 3 times in a week. Not the wind, not the old roadside pole, but sabotage. Someone was squeezing me from the inside, trying to choke me out before I could fight back. So I did what anyone would. I dug into the footage from the security cameras I'd installed last year after coyotes started sniffing around the coop. And there he was, clear as day, Jake Miller, my new farmhand, the guy I hired because he seemed quiet and needed the gig. Jake didn't talk much, just nodded and hauled hay like some kind of robot, but looking back lately he'd been too curious for my liking. "Where's the generator, Ethan? Are there cameras by the well? How do you know if someone's in?" "The Northfield." Questions I brushed off with a get-back-to-work kid, figuring he was just trying to fit in. My mistake. On the footage, there he was in the dead of night, a hooded shadow messing with the generator's wires, his face lit up for a split second when he glanced sideways. And then, on a pitch-black Thursday, I caught him live. He was near the chicken coop with a backpack slung over his shoulder, fiddling with the latches like he was about to set the hens loose just to screw me over. I didn't think twice, dropped the flashlight, and bolted after him. The idiot tripped over an exposed root, went down on his knees in the wet dirt, and the backpack rolled away, tools clattering onto the ground. I stood over him, chest heaving, and barked, "Spill it, Jake, what are you doing?" He lifted his mud-streaked face, eyes wide like someone who knows they're caught, and spat the words out like they hurt. "Vanessa paid me, said you stole this land from the community, that it was hers by right." I couldn't hold it in. I let out a laugh so loud it echoed across the field, a sound half crazed, half disbelieving. "And you bought that from the HOA queen?" I asked, almost feeling sorry for him. "The woman who thinks clipboards and made-up fines give her rights to everything? What did she buy you with, Jake? A few bucks and a pat on the back?" He dropped his head, the backpack still open, revealing wire cutters and a radio, the same kind Vanessa's goons carried. The kid was the rat in my house, and I'd let him in. Jake was done for. After he hit the mud and saw there was no way out, he spilled everything like a torn-up book. He handed it all over, scribbled maps with red lines crisscrossing my land, encrypted emails he'd gotten from a contact labeled VB, and even detailed plans of how Vanessa was coming back full force to take me down for good. It was a large-scale attack, a last-ditch move to wipe me off the map before I could strike back. But she didn't count on one thing. I don't play alone. I called Ryan that same night, showed him every scrap of evidence Jake coughed up, and we set a trap that'd make my granddad grin in his grave. Live cameras scattered across the property, hidden at angles that caught everything, and Ryan lying in wait at a blind spot near the north field, with 2 deputies ready for the signal. The day came fast. The sun had barely risen when I heard the rumble of engines. Vanessa was back this time with 7 goons, a drone buzzing overhead like a vulture, and the same arrogance of someone who thinks they've already won. I let them come in, playing it sloppy. 10 meters past the gate, just enough to commit. They marched in confident, boots stomping my land like it was already theirs, the drone climbing to map what they'd never have. Then I hit the button on the remote Ryan gave me. Sirens erupted from all 4 corners of the farm, a deafening blast that even shut the chickens up. Strobe lights, rigged from old tractor headlights, flared to life all at once, blinding the crew. And then Ryan's voice sliced through the air over the megaphone, deep and unrelenting. "Sheriff Ryan Carter, you're under arrest for trespassing, forgery, and attempted fraud. Drop everything and hands up now." The goons froze. The drone crashed to the ground like a broken toy, and Vanessa stood there, face pale but eyes burning with hate. She took a step toward me, ignoring the deputies already circling the group, and hissed through clenched teeth, "You'll regret this, Parker." I gave her a slow smile, the kind that comes from deep in the soul, and said back, "Doubt it. My granddad said no to you in '89 when you tried buying this land for peanuts for some shady scheme. I just doubled down, Vanessa. Only this time you don't walk away." Ryan cuffed her himself, the click of the metal ringing like music to me as the goons were hauled off to the squad cars. The farm was safe, my granddad's legacy intact, and Vanessa Brooks finally fell from the paper throne she'd built herself. Vanessa went down, and she went down hard. It wasn't just the sound of the cuffs snapping on her wrists, but the collapse of the whole empire of lies she'd constructed. 6 of the 7 goons, those tactical boot tough guys who'd seemed so intimidating with their clipboards and radios, turned state's evidence before they even felt the hard bench of the squad car, Ryan told me later, with that rare half-smirk he barely let slip. They were tripping over each other to talk first, Ethan, gave up dates, secret meetings in roadside motels, even crumpled receipts Pinewood Ventures swore they'd burned. The state investigation came in like a swarm of bees on a kicked hive, cascading fraud, document forgery, extortion so blatant even a blind man could see it. My farm was secure. The air smelled of wet earth and freedom again. The chickens went back to clucking like nothing had happened, and my granddad's deed, that yellowed paper carrying the weight of our history, went back to the safe in the barn, locked behind boards Vanessa would never find. For now, I could breathe, for now. But the victory had a bittersweet taste, an aftertaste I couldn't shake. As Ryan hauled Vanessa and her defeated posse away, I kept the tablet she'd dropped in the chaos. Her mistake, my trophy. I sat on the porch that night, the sky painted purple and orange, and started digging. The device was loaded with digital dirt, fake maps with lines drawn over land that wasn't hers, emails full of codes and promises of fat profits, spreadsheets with names I'd never heard, until I found something that stopped my finger on the screen. A lone email, no sender, just a subject line in cold black letters, Project Midwest Alpha. I opened it, and there it was, short and sharp as a knife. Next zone, 42.331, 88.124. My heart skipped, but it wasn't my land. I know every inch of my farm, every coordinate my granddad made me memorize when I could barely reach the tractor's handlebars. That was somewhere else, someone else's story, another victim who didn't yet know Vanessa's steamroller, or what was left of it, was shifting its aim. I grabbed an old county map from the attic, the same one my granddad used to mark our fence lines, and traced the coordinates with a dull pencil. It wasn't even 20 kilometers from here, an area of open fields and smaller farms, the kind of place where people live quietly, trusting the land like I trusted mine. Someone was out there right now, maybe sipping coffee on their porch like I was, listening to the wind whisper through the cornfields, with no clue that the next eviction notice was already being printed in some dark pinewood office. I looked. Up at the horizon, the sun sinking behind the hills, staining everything red like a warning I couldn't ignore. My war was over, sure. I'd beaten Vanessa, protected what was mine, honored the no my granddad gave her back in '89. But that email was an echo, a signal that the monster I'd taken down had more heads, more plans, more land to devour. And somewhere just a few kilometers away, someone else was about to wake up to armed strangers at their door, without a sheriff in the family to call for backup. Vanessa's down, my farm's still standing, but this story's far from over. If you've ever dealt with an out-of-control HOA, the kind that finds your shadow for existing or sends goons to measure your grass with a ruler, drop it. In the comments, I want to know how you face those clipboard kings, because every story's a weapon for whoever's next. And subscribe, seriously. Because this fight I just told you about, with feisty chickens, cut fences, and a sheriff up my sleeve, it's only the beginning. Pinewood Ventures might be bleeding, but that email on her tablet tells me there's more people in their crosshairs, more land to steal, more families who'll wake up to the nightmare I lived through. And I'm not staying quiet while they try again. Neither should you.